Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, on behalf of the European Institute of Romania, let me welcome you to this new debate within the European News in the Spotlight series of events. Within these conferences, our goal is to bring forward topics of interest that are tackled upon during the different presidencies of the Council of the European Union. Given that in this semester, Sweden holds the presidency of the Council, we are extremely honored to have the Embassy of Romania in Sweden as partner in today's event. And let me use this opportunity to express our thanks to His Excellency Ambassador Daniel Ionita and to his team for their cooperation and support in organizing this debate. As we all know, this year we celebrate 30 years of single market, namely 30 years since 12 member states decided to abolish border controls amongst each other, launching the free movement of goods, of people, services, and capital in the European community. One of the main achievements of the single market has been to make the EU a key player globally. Nevertheless, there is still work to be done for adapting the single market to the new challenges posed by the post-pandemic recovery, the Russian illegal and unprovoked war against Ukraine, and the twin green and digital transition. I would say that a shared priority of the current trio, stronger and more effective competitiveness, represents an area where the Swedish presidency of the Council of the EU is promoting a common approach. The recent experiences have taught us that ensuring the long-term competitiveness of the EU single market depends on its cohesion and convergence, while avoiding its fragmentation and further gaps between the member states. So our event today aims at identifying concrete steps that the European institutions and the member states can take to make sure that the single market continues to be a source of wealth, welfare, and international standing for the European Union. So without extending the introductory comment, allow me to give the floor to Mr. Daniel Ionita, the Romanian ambassador to Sweden. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguished audience, dear colleagues, Your Excellency, good afternoon. For me, it's a great pleasure to be with you today. And thank you for this invitation. I'm very glad to see even online good old friends here on this conference, and I hope actually that after my presentation I will I continue to remain friends with them, and hopefully actually I will make also more friends. This is, I think, a very timely and important discussions for at least three reasons. First, the EU was initially created in difficult times in the aftermath of the World War II as a peace process, which had as its core the European Community of Steel and Coal. From 6 countries at the beginning, the European Community has grown to the current 27 member states of the EU. And from the need to control the coal, we're acting now for cleaner and greener solution to provide steel, which continues to be essential for our industry and for our future. In the meantime, the power of attraction of the EU has become huge, and other countries from Western Balkans and Eastern neighborhood, including Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova, expressed their interest in joining the Union. There are lessons to be learned from the European Union's history. Broad community-level programs and reforms with a clear competitiveness dimensions, such as the common commercial policy in the 50s and the single market program in the 80s, boosted economic activity and productivity. Second, nowadays, with, as you mentioned before, with the illegal war launched by Russia in Ukraine, with the economic recovery after the COVID pandemic, with the high inflation rates and assertiveness, I would say, on creation of a multipolar world, we also live in difficult times where strategic vision and long-term solutions are really needed, not only for the member states, but also for our union as a whole. Third reason, the EU is for the citizens, and our citizens have the right to be better informed and about what we are doing and about our future plans. We need, I think, to communicate better, and we need to engage more in public debates because the EU is not only about benefits, but also about shared responsibilities. It's important to be able to use the necessary technical language for describing sophisticated measures, but at the end of the day, competitiveness and digital transition and Green Deal are not just simple words. They produce effects not only for our own lives, but also for the generations to come after us. And in this sense, I would like also to congratulate the Institute for European Affairs in Romania for having this great initiative for putting competitiveness on our today's agenda. In a nutshell, if we are united, I think that a stronger common EU level action can just spur prosperity and productivity again today. Dear friends, I'm privileged to serve in Sweden in times when Sweden is not just striving for becoming a NATO ally, an objective which is fully supported by Romania, but also when Sweden holds the presidency of the EU. By the way, yesterday, the Swedish parliament voted with a large majority the law on Sweden's accession to the NATO treaty, which is an historic milestone in our future cooperation. As you may know, and I'm sure that my dear colleague Therese Hiden, the Swedish ambassador to Bucharest, will further develop on this topic, the support for Ukraine, security, competitiveness, green and energy transition, democratic values, and the rule of law are the priorities of the Swedish presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of this year. As an eyewitness, I can testify that almost everything went so far in accordance with the plans. The two unpredicted events popped up in the last months, namely the Inflation Reduction Act and the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, but our Swedish friends mobilized exemplary and worked hard for gaining EU integrated responses and approach, including organizing a donor conference for the victims of the later tragic events. Moreover, there were very successfully organized a dozen, and I tend to say countless, of conferences, events, and meetings in the EU format, and also 8 informal ministerial meetings in different configurations at XPO Conference Center in Arlanda, including ministerial conferences on justice, internal affairs, energy, transportation, competition, defense, development, trade, as well as other several meetings at the level of parliaments, including one very important on CSDP. Distinguished audience, now allow me a few remarks on the main topic, the main subject of our event. As you may know, competitiveness is not only a very important topic, but also a very complex one because it covers almost everything. In December last year, our Swedish friends had an idea of drafting a strategy on competitiveness. As a result, as you may know, 1 week ago, on the 16th of March, an essential communication from the Commission to the European Parliament, the Council, the European Economic and Social Committee, and the Committee of the Regions, named Long-Term Competitiveness of the EU, looking beyond 2030, was published. This important document will be discussed at the European Council, which starts today in Brussels, and I'm sure that our heads of states and governments will provide guidance for the future. The European Council and the European Parliament are invited to endorse the priorities identified in this communication and take stock of the progress made on a regular basis. In communication, it is written that in the face of strong global competition and the new geopolitical context, competitiveness can never be taken for granted. It deserves political attention at the highest political level. The renewed attention to long-term competitiveness is about the European Union taking charge of its attractiveness and standing in the world economy. The EU is at a key moment for the next decades, and it needs a joint push from business and policymakers to put Europe on the right path for the future. Businesses have long-term perspectives and need predictable and competitive framework conditions for their investments. That is what will decide where the future economic growth will take place. Today, there is a broad consensus on the European model for inclusive economic growth based on sustainable competitiveness, economic security, trade and open strategic autonomy, and fair competition as a source of prosperity. To foster the future of Europe's competitiveness, The Commission proposes to work along 9 mutually reinforcing drivers. Accompanying these 9 drivers, and as a second leg of action, the Commission will work actively towards a growth-enhancing regulatory framework. The 9 drivers are: first, functioning single market; second, access to private capital; third, public investments and infrastructure; fourth, research and innovation; fifth, energy; sixth, circularity; seven, digitalization; eight, education and skills; and 9, trade and open strategic autonomy. The 9 drivers are interlinked, and they will contribute to environmental sustainability, resilience, stability, well-being for all, fairness, and increased productivity. This sounds like a magic formula, but the reality, I think, is more prosaic. There is no single answer to our current challenges, but a combination of factors. And we need to act in unity and solidarity if we want our union to gain weight, to be respected, and to take its well-deserved place on the international arena. In an ever-changing environment, these drivers will be measured on the basis of KPI, which stands for Key Performance Indicator, as you may know, objectives, and monitoring frameworks that have already been developed in sectoral policies, the Single Market Scoreboard, the Digital Decade Policy Program, and the European Semester. Would it be possible to provide competitiveness and, in the meantime, digital and green transition? This is, I think, a huge question, but I think the answer is yes, but I think it won't at all be easy. Maybe you, during today's event, will be able to identify some good ideas, some good solution for the future debates. I do thank you for your attention, and I wish you a very, very successful conference. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Ionita, for your introductory comments on single market competitiveness, and especially for underlying the notions unity, solidarity, shared benefits, and responsibilities, which I think are extremely important in all actions that the EU has envisaged. We do hope we will continue our cooperation and organize future events on topics of interest. Thank you very much. Let me give the floor to Mrs. Daniela Gutman, Secretary of State for European Affairs within the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And at the same time, let me thank Mrs. Gutman for all the support that she gives to our institute. Mrs. Gutman, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the nice words. This is what friends are for, so I really appreciate that. I would also like to thank the European Institute of Romania for organizing this debate. It's a very interesting, a very topical and very trendy debate. And it's not the first one, so congratulations to you. And also I would like to thank Ambassador Hayden, who represents the Swedish presidency today, for steering up this discussion about climate, about investments, about strategies of growth at a time when we really have to envisage transformations both of our societies and our economies. I would like just to frame from the very beginning the geopolitical context that we are operating in. First of all, we all know the dramatic consequences of the illegal war of Russia against Ukraine, with all the consequences and the affected lives that we see daily in more than 1 year. The second one, I will name the competition between US and China, and also the global polarization, which leads to economic and social fragmentations at multilateral level. The third one, I think we have to face global challenges and global transitions, such as the impact of the climate change, and also pressures that are very high on small and fragile states to find financing to respond to these challenges. And the last one that I would like to mention is the increase of the weight of the global South. We all see that countries such as India, Brazil, China, Turkey, and South Africa they really do promote selective diplomacy of benefits, and also they are avoiding to position themselves in this geopolitical puzzle when it comes about what we have to witness daily at Europe's border. So I would say from the very beginning that the subsequent shocks, be it economic, migratory, pandemic, security, humanitarian, energy, inflation, all have exposed us, both our vulnerabilities, but also our interconnections. So I think what we have to do now is, first of all, to acknowledge the link between security and economy in a way that leads nations, people, and business around the world to rethink our visions and our ambitions. Of course, while power is forged by competitiveness, competitiveness is also forged by innovation, technology, access to resources. So I will say that the green and digital transitions have a significant security dimension, and they are the main drivers of the change towards the climate neutral future. The important question right now is, how do we respond? How do we lead this change? Because we all see there are different initiatives of partners and competitors to increase competitiveness. And I would just mention two of them, the Inflation Reduction Act of the USA, and also China and other strong economies that are striving for access to strategic resources. Of course, the EU makes no exception, and we had our share of economic and geopolitical challenges, and I think our response was a very good one, since we had such a pressure on the resilience of the European Union. I think the way European Union responded to it is a good step in terms of our credibility. We saw that when cohesion is somehow put in danger by national approaches, we as Europe have provided and proved ourselves to be resilient, showing solidarity and unity in our responses. Now, today, more than ever, the European Union is at the crossroads of major economic and geopolitical challenges. The Russian war brought not only a large-scale conventional war back to Europe after decades of peace, impacting our economies and our countries, but also led to a large number of disruptions on multiple areas, and I will mention just a few. Dependency of the Russian energy was a huge burden for the EU member states, and we have to act to ensure a fast diversification of fossil fuels imports to reduce the overall energy consumption, to accelerate the energy transition, to reduce dependencies on unreliable actors. So in this context, the EU Green Deal and the subsequent acts of the EU Green Deal have developed into a tool to facilitate the economic recovery of the Union, to detach it from toxic dependencies, and to reduce greenhouse and gas emissions and other forms of pollution. Of course, the increased role of renewables and reaching the 40% renewable target is both a challenge and are very expensive. So in order to achieve that, what do we need? We need energy grids and storage facilities. We need to strengthen and modernize our infrastructure and policy. We need to reinforce a critical industry for the future. We need to build a more secure supply at affordable prices, especially for access to energy, raw materials, and electronic components. And we have to use our full potential of digital technologies. Yet we know that the digital services have also an important digital footprint. The main question, of course, that also Ambassador Dionitsa asked is how to protect our EU competitiveness while walking down this path. Over the past years, the EU competitiveness have suffered from declining productivity growth. Global competition became tougher, and value and supply chains are more exposed to harsh disruptions. So the answer, I think, is, at least from the perspective of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to strengthen the single market and to deepen our integration. Despite the resilience of the single market, the EU productivity is lower than the one of the stronger economies such as US, Japan, South Korea, and China. This is why I think the European model should be more promoted and should be based on its strongholds such as the double transition, the sustainable competitiveness, enhanced economic security, open strategic autonomy, fair competition to ensure equal opportunities, and the EU's innovation capacity, just to mention a few of them. Of course, we need horizontal approaches to link the 9 key factors of the recent EU strategy on long-term competitiveness that Ambassador Ionita mentioned to a regulated framework to enhance growth. And we need to enhance the productivity for technologies and industries for the future. Now, it is true that the single market is the biggest achievement of the European integration and the main engine for the EU competitiveness. Without the single market, the EU GDP would have been 9% less than the 18% of the world GDP that we enjoy today. But competitiveness is more than the single market functioning. It is about a European style of life. It is about high quality of its infrastructure and institutional framework. It is about the rule of law and the values and the principles that we all share, all of them contributing to the consolidation of the European economy. So I think when we look to all the segments of the puzzle, what we need right now is a long-term political support to ensure a predictable regulation framework which is adequate to competitiveness in order to stimulate economic growth and investments, ensure the competencies needed for the double transition, and to facilitate better access to financing. Of course, that all industrial actors need to be part of this transformation if Europe is to achieve this goal. Of course, that we have to stimulate the industrial sectors to participate both in the climate neutrality effort, in a more digital future, and an increased economic open strategic autonomy. Of course, that the private sector has its pivotal role in accelerating the twin transitions. But the companies would be successful only if the public sector will fully play its part. Of course, that we know that the latest challenges that we have, high prices of energy, high inflation, governmental intervention to protect businesses and people from high food prices, need of solidarity in the war context, have seriously eroded the fiscal space of national governments. So we need a level playing field within the single market in order to ensure that no member state is left behind. True resilience is dependent on the real internal cohesion. We need no disparities. We don't need fragmentations. We don't need uneven developments of our regions and of our states. Last but not least, I would also mention the importance of increasing the citizens' commitment to the need for this change that we are all striving for. So how can we engage European citizens? And I think one answer is by providing them a general access to subsidies for green technologies such as solar panels or low carbon heat pumps, or the insulation of residential building, which is, by the way, a very successful policy that is implemented in Romania. So to conclude, I will emphasize just two ideas, and I'm looking forward to listen to your responses. First, the single market has to continue to adapt to new challenges, underpinning long-term competitiveness, productivity, and social cohesion. And the second one is that we need to take advantage of the opportunities created by the double transition, green and digital, because they are the real game changers in the field. And it is a strategic imperative for us to continue down this road. So if we want to lead the change, and if we want to foster the growth in areas of the future, then we really need to continue and to get the solidarity and to get the strength and the financing and the unity of the EU member states in order to achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you also, Mrs. Gutmann, for your insightful comments on the geopolitical context, on global transitions, for acknowledging the strong link between security and economy, and especially for giving us a brief view on how we can respond to all the challenges, especially by strengthening the single market and deepening the integration. Thank you for being with us today. And now let me give the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Therese Hayden, Ambassador of Sweden to Romania. Thank you, Your Excellency, for accepting our invitation. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mocanu, and the big thanks to European Institute of Romania and the Romanian Embassy in Stockholm for organizing this and for inviting me. And thanks also, Ambassador Ionisa, for your kind words, and also from Mrs. Gutmann towards the Swedish presidency. I understand we do keep you very busy and your embassy very busy in Stockholm. Let's hope it's all for a good thing. And more importantly, I want to thank Romania and the Romanian authorities for being such constructive partners in all EU affairs. I do have some remarks that might be perhaps a bit more narrowly targeting on competitiveness. A lot of important things have been said already about how this topic interlinks with a lot of other important topics on the agenda, which also are part of the Swedish presidency priorities. But allow me perhaps then to hone in a little bit on the competitiveness agenda, which is, of course, as you all know, one of the four main priorities of the Swedish presidency. So the EU long-term competitiveness and the 30 years anniversary of the single market, of course, will be an important part of the European Council, starting today, as already mentioned. And we do have hopes for an ambitious discussions and forward-looking discussions. Due to these uncertain times that we are witnessing today, it's putting our economies under intense strain. And apart from addressing the short-term challenges and needs of businesses, we must also give due consideration to the long-term economic challenges. And most importantly, we need to tackle the significant and widening gaps in growth and innovation between the EU member states, as the previous speakers have already underlined. And that is why we welcome the recently published communication of the Commission on the single market at 30 and the communication on European long-term competitiveness. We see these two initiatives as strongly interconnected and mutually reinforcing. And indeed, the natural starting point for a forceful European competitiveness strategy is the single market. And it cannot be taken for granted. We need a plan and a vision for how this single market can be a strong engine for jobs and growth over the next 30 years. For example, we need to pursue a policy of strategic openness in support of global free trade. We need to become serious about better regulation, a better regulation agenda, and create a business and innovation-friendly environment more ambitious policies for research and innovation, as well as the skills agenda. And it's a long-term perspective that constitutes the basis for future growth. The net zero industry has a vital role to play here, of course, and we need to do what we can to support the deployment and upscaling of this, as has already been mentioned by the previous speaker as well. But we need an even broader approach for the whole economic base. Businesses need to have a long-term perspective, and they want the clear and the predictable rules and the competitive framework conditions. And the single market 30 years anniversary is indeed an excellent opportunity for a forward-looking discussion on these topics and how to strengthen the EU competitiveness in general. And a well-functioning single market, we feel, is the best way for building EU resilience and competitiveness. Favorable rules and the right investment climate for our companies will help the EU in being the front runner of green and digital transition. This is our common goal. And the single market communication will be the starting point for this long-term single market strategy. So we're taking the first steps now, but we still have a bit of the journey left. It's of course, the celebration, the single market 30 years is a milestone in itself, but we do need to look forward to have these future-oriented reforms, and we need to strengthen the single market because it is the world's largest integrated single market area, and it is crucial for our long-term competitiveness and our long-term economic growth. And we do believe that it is key to focus on enforcing existing single market rules, and in particular, barriers to cross-border provisions of services. These vital steps that we're starting to take now on how the single market can continue to be a strong engine for strong and sustainable jobs, entrepreneurship, and sustainable growth over the 30 years. We're starting now, and we look forward, of course, of having not only Romania, but also Romania as part of this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you for your comments on the recent communication on the single market and the competitiveness. The need to be an engine for jobs and growth. I noted that. You mentioned also the need for strategic openness, better regulation agenda to create a business and innovation-friendly environment, and so on. So thank you very much, Your Excellency, for participating to our conference. I do hope we will have the chance to cooperate again in the future on topics of mutual interests. And now let me give the floor to Octavian Dragomir Jora, professor at the Bucharest University of Economic Studies and founder of the Market for Ideas magazine, in order to introduce our panel speakers and moderate the discussions. Once more, I would like to thank all the above speakers for their participation today, and I do hope we will meet again in our next conferences. Octavian, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for your kind invitation. I accepted it in an instant because I was incentivized and intrigued by a word that was a buzzword, a rock star word in my youth, or even better said, in my childhood as an economist. And of course, this word is competitiveness. To paraphrase William Shakespeare, back then I was thinking of it as something that brings into the scenery much ado about something. It's certainly about something that competitiveness speaks for, and despite it's a very controversial concept within economists, it's one of the words that resisted and passed the test of time, even if nowadays it has many fanciful and fashionable contenders. We speak from some decades about sustainability. We're speaking about resilience, robustness, anti-fragility. Welcome engineering buzzwords into the powerhouse of economics, but that's it. It's a natural interbreeding of sciences. But it's not necessarily the moment for putting very difficult epistemological questions now. It's time being pragmatic, because this challenge on competitiveness and the opportunities thereof come in the context of some very interesting phenomena that go hand in hand. We're speaking about twin, green, and digital transition. And some may say, and I have to confess that I always like to call myself an against the tide economist, because there is someone who needs to swim or sail against the tides anytime, anywhere. So when this necessity appears, here I am. I have to be frank and ask very soberly whether or not these transitions are always and by any means twins, or in some instances maybe some stepbrothers or stepsisters. But without giving verdicts before judging things, it's my pleasure to introduce 4 distinguished panelists that could bring light into this stormy period of the history of Europe, and make a point on these 2 crucial phenomena that could shape the Europe of tomorrow. Please allow me to start the introductory remarks with welcoming the presence of Mr. Mats Engström. He is Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations and Senior Advisor at the Swedish Institute of European Policy Studies. He's also an IEEP Associate and columnist for the news site Altinget. Welcome in this hybrid world of journalism and expertise of scholarly or think tank nature. His professional career includes position in the Swedish government services, inter alia as Deputy State Secretary and Director of the International Department at the Ministry for the Environment, and as political advisor to Foreign Minister Anna Lindh between 1998 and 2001. Mr. Engström, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to this very timely event. As was mentioned already, the European Council is perhaps having lunch now or starting their meeting now, but they will very soon dive into exactly the things that we are now discussing, I understand. And thanks also to the speakers for already describing, for example, the Commission input to that meeting. I will try to make some introductory remarks and also then look forward to the discussion. But I think in general, I agree with what State Secretary Gittman said, that the strategy that is needed to improve competitiveness has to be rather broad. There are, of course, important elements also highlighted in the Commission communication on kind of core issues such as the single market, of course, as investment in research and development, as access to capital for startups to grow, and so on. But it's also important, I believe, in the European model that is also attracting other parts of the world to its values. And I'm thinking about social inclusion compared to some other parts of the world, and also issues such as gender equality and other issues that were mentioned here that are a bit wider. I think the Commission has struck a good balance in its communication and in the 9 drivers and the 17 indicators that Ambassador Unita mentioned. Maybe we will get more into that later, because I also think that will be during this Swedish presidency an issue discussing what kind of indicators, is this the right ones, and this single market scoreboard that was mentioned is also supposed to be enlarged, I think, to a single market and competitiveness scoreboard. So this will be an important issue for discussion, exactly what indicators to have. But personally, I find it rather well balanced. What I'm perhaps missing on this general level, and maybe that is not so surprising given the kind of document this is, but which I find really important, is the diversity within the European Union that I think Ambassador Hidén also referred to, and also the ability of different both member states and regions to participate, to be competitiveness, and to have an economic development. So maybe we will come back to that as well. I also think from also economic history that there are issues around institutions that are important, the quality above from both public administration, but also other issues related to institutions in a wide sense, and that there are kind of public goods that are not really mentioned here, like financial stability, for example, thinking about the banking situation now, or also even security in a wider sense, that are things that the European Union is bringing, but is perhaps not on this competitive agenda itself. But still important, I think, to keep in mind that the European Union as a framework delivers some of these public goods that are preconditions for competitiveness. Then turning to the green transition, I would say that we are perhaps now in a situation where many accept the description that there is really a big global market for these green technologies, and it was also referred to the US Inflation Reduction Act and the kind of green tech race in different parts of the world. So 20 years ago, maybe that some people saw that as a kind of idealistic description, but it's core, I think, economy now, that this is a growing market, and it's also integrating it into other, not only the so-called green tech sectors, but also, for example, industrial production in general. As I think Ambassador Unita referred to the green steel development, which is taking place, I think, both in Romania and Sweden. And it is difficult to imagine steel companies in the future really being able to compete if they don't go down that way. So it's also the so-called traditional sectors. But here, I think one core issue for the green transition is also bringing economic benefits to almost all parts of the union. And to be concrete there, I think much more can be done on, for example, R&D centers of excellence. I think when the European Union is looking forward to its next multi-annual financial perspective and to the new coming R&D program of the Horizon Europe, there has to be more coordination and kind of centers of excellence in different parts of the union. Also, the innovation fund, I think, has to be more evenly used in different parts of the union. We can develop on that later. I also think one should recognize, in addition to skills, that is really important, also that targets and regulations play an important role for innovation. There is, of course, red tape that is difficult for companies, but it's also important to say that deregulation in general is probably not the answer. There is important, well-designed regulation that can contribute to innovation and competitiveness. I think there's a good scientific basis for stating that. And also on the green transition, I would also to refer to what State Secretary Gittman said about the geopolitical landscape, where I believe that's absolutely right and very important that this is changing. And for example, on critical raw materials, that the European Union cannot believe that it can just impose its will on other parts of the world. And that is also why the Commission is now emphasizing partnerships, but this also really has to happen, these partnerships to be something that is really working. So I will not be too long, but just also to say something on the digital, in addition to issues around the dominance of the US on platforms and other infrastructure, and also for China. I think Europe should also recognize some of its strengths. I mean, I know there is important progress in Romania, for example on software, but I'm also thinking about industrial production and the use of Internet of Things and what the Germans call Industrie 4.0 null and also artificial intelligence in production. There are also areas here which I think European has strength that can be further developed. And one important aspect of doing that is the vocational skills, which is, I think, also very important for competitiveness and to really to find the ways to increase the digital skills for people who have already been working perhaps 10 years or more in their different sectors. Well, I will try to conclude now, but also just trying to go back and remember 20 years or more, I was part of the Swedish delegation to the summit in Lisbon in Portugal, which established the so-called Lisbon Agenda for Competitiveness. And the idea was to create the world's most competitive economy by 2010. And one can say now that that was perhaps a bit naive, but I think it illustrates two things. And one was the difficulty in foreseeing the future, because people who were in Lisbon, I think, didn't really imagine what would happen in China with the enormous increase of production in China, for example. We don't know everything about the future. But the second thing, which I also think that one has always to state in this kind of discussions, is that what can be done on the EU level is really important, but is also only a limited part of the answer. Very much is up to the member states and to the national decisions, and not the least the decisions to cooperate, for example, where you do the research and development, where you develop the green technologies. You also read the commitment from all member states that this has to be geographically better distributed in the Union. So it's both the EU level, but it's also very much the priorities of the member states, I think. But thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Engström. As it is difficult to compose the big picture of competitiveness and to pronounce properly as well, it is in the same manner difficult to decompose competitiveness at the level of sectors, of industries, of economic actors, or even individuals. And the task is even more difficult when speaking about these fluid times in which we have manageable transitions, but also we have occurrences that appear all of a sudden and are hardly anticipable, and all the more they could be administered with great efforts and huge costs. And this makes the landscape so unappealing for some, even if we have in mind the target that sound very promising and could deliver eventually once hit to our expectations. Thank you once again, and I now have the pleasure to introduce Professor András Inotai, Professor Emeritus at the Institute of World Economics in Budapest. Professor Inotai is Honorary Professor at the Department of European Political and Governance Studies, College of Europe, and this has been the situation since January 2023. Has taught at the College of Europe in Bruges and Natolin since 1993. He has his doctorate in economic science with German habilitation on a very hot topic, host country behavior towards foreign direct investment, a hot topic in my year of formation as an economist. His PhD on Andean integration, having in mind alternatives to the pathway that European Union took and continues to further. He was a research fellow and head of department and first deputy director at the Institute of World Economics in a very solid build-up of his career as an academic, and of course is member of numerous Hungarian international organizations and editorial boards of professional journals. I know I read and I now had the pleasure to meet almost in person Professor Inotai. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction and also the honoring invitation. I am really very pleased to participate in this discussion, despite the fact that I am definitely not very much involved in the digital economy, but more in concerning competitiveness. And I would like to make a couple of remarks on competitiveness, not only concerning the past experience, but also what is related to the future. And then second, I would like to point out to focus on some initial steps of the European Union concerning its new industrial policy. And finally, some remarks on the challenges ahead, success and failure, and how to avoid potential failures. Well, concerning competitiveness, it is well known, and I will be very brief. We have a lot of experience with price competitiveness. If you have a lower price, you are more competitive. You can sell your products or your services. And price competitiveness, however, is to some extent, and in some cases it is overestimated, based on cheap labor, which is, and on a self-destructive devaluation of the national currency. So that should be avoided. But we have another element of competitiveness, which I would call quality competitiveness, where the price is higher, but still the quality is even better, and potential buyers will opt for a higher quality product, even if it is more expensive. Then we have the just-in-time element, that if you can produce at the exact time what the market needs, then you will be competitive. If you can't, then you are out of the race. Another element is, of course, the size of the firm. You may be extremely competitive, but if you produce just to say 2,000 units, and the market demand is about 100,000, then of course your products will hardly be marketable. Finally, the supply chains. We have had a lot of discussion about global and regional supply chains, which will be playing a very important role also in the future of the European competitiveness and the shaping of European, a new industrial policy of the European Union as proposed by the Commission. And if you have the right supply chains, then you are more competitive, and both because of price, quality, just in time, etc., etc. But what we miss several times in this discussion is that it is too narrow to analyze just competitiveness from the based on the features I've already mentioned. What is at stake, and it has been formulated already in the introductory remark, long-term competitiveness. I would put it in another way, sustainable competitiveness. How can we create sustainable competitiveness? Which are the demographic, the educational, the economic, the financial, the environmental, the social, the mental elements of sustainable competitiveness. The adjustment capacity of the society. The adjustment capacity is not an economic terminology. It is a social and mental terminology. How can we enhance the adjustment capacity of the European society without endangering the social cohesion? Because social cohesion is also an important element of sustainable competitiveness. And last but not least, it is as Europe is embedded into the global economy and benefits from it, it is, I think, the mutual benefit that reliability, confidence, trust is extremely important, both within the European Union and in our cooperation with third countries, with partners. This is the first. The second remark I would like to make is that the European Union is facing at the moment, at the same time, three challenges. One is the green challenge, climate. The second is digital challenge, technology. And the third is the geopolitical challenge, security, defense capacity. And these three challenges are extremely intertwined. That is something which until now had not yet been fully understood, I think. But the European Union has developed a new industrial policy and has reconfirmed that it needs to recalibrate its approach and focus on the emergence of key industries and key suppliers and provide key infrastructure in Europe. But the right balance between selective protectionism and openness to trade and investment needs to be struck. The goal of industrial policy should not be to produce everything at home, but to preserve the capability of production. The next question is, of course, how to finance a new industrial policy. There is a GDIP program proposed by the Commission just now that the EU funding has to be streamlined, that part of the 7-year or multi-annual financial framework and the priority should be changed in accordance with the new industrial policy and the digital economy on the one hand. Then the state aid rules have to be relaxed. It's with some question mark. And third, a new EU fund, the so-called sovereignty fund, has to be created. Most of this money should come from the private sector, but public money, public finance will definitely be necessary. And the question is how well we will be able to use and not misuse public funding. Another issue here is that Europe is in several crucial raw materials, particularly rare earths and lithium, which are very important for the future competitiveness, dependent on the external non-EU sources. The European Union has put forward a plan that until 2030, this dependence should be diminished, and no country, and it is particularly meant here China, no country should have more than 2/3 of the EU supply. And at the moment, 60 to 90% of the rare earth is coming from China. But there are EU plans, a minimum of 10% own production, 40%, minimum 40% to be processed in the European Union, and minimum 15% reused in the European Union. Concerning own production, lithium, which is a critical element of the electric cars and the batteries, there is lithium available already in some EU member countries, Portugal, Czech Republic, France, and rare earth. A a mine had been opened up just some months ago in the north of Sweden. So this is these are the good news. Also, new contracts have been signed with Chile and New Zealand. Negotiations are on have taken place with Canada, with Kazakhstan, with Namibia, and even with the Ukraine. And what is not less important, there is a formal agreement already negotiated in the last weeks with the United States to create a common position in establishing an international club, including the main suppliers and the main users of rare earth and lithium and others. So this could be a global initiative. That's Last but not least, let me make a couple of remarks on the digital economy and the adjustment process. We are living in a period of very rapid changes, and rapid change has a lot of positive developments on the one hand, but is challenging the social cohesion. So the real question is, how can we, on the one hand, coordinate the speed of the development on the one hand, and the availability of the necessary financial resources on the other hand? Because if there is no financial resource, the speed cannot be maintained. The success or failure is not an economic issue. Rapid change always creates everywhere an economic divide. Those who are adjusting more rapidly and more successfully get more money. Those who cannot, they will have less money. So here we need a fair redistribution of the money in order to avoid social problems. There is a social divide. Here we need more common responsibility, and I would say even self-responsibility by those who at the moment potentially may become the temporary losers. There is a mental or psychological divide as well. Those who have failed or feel themselves failed, they immediately will find a good explanation, a good argument. Oh, somebody has to be blamed. We are the victims. And if this mentality will gain ground, then it would be a hotbed of populist arguments, and that should be avoided. We have to be open, remain open, and that is my last remark, in order to keep social cohesion and mental cohesion. We definitely need in the future not only economic preparation for the future, but a mental preparation, which I would like to describe in one word. We have to create a European identity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Inatai. Excellent point. It's quite in line with my introduction, because I wanted to emphasize that competitiveness is not just about technological recipes universally valid to human needs, but it has a very deep, a very profound, and a very thoroughly discoverable human and humane side. That's the full picture of what competitiveness is, and how it should be understood and processed. More pointedly, a very interesting topic about a discussion related to critical resources, or so-called rare earths. And the good news that Europe discovered on its own space deposits of such important resources for the both green and digital twin and synergic transition. But my question is, and it's a question to work in the background, not necessarily to be answered in this very moment, is there not the slightest risk that exploiting the European way, or more precisely the Swedish way, that is very environmental friendly and socially concerning, those resources could make their integration in the European value chains and less competitive option relative to the old way of processing and trading rare earths from other sides of the world. It is a bright side of the news, and I suspect there is also a very complicated calculation that comes with it. Thank you so much once again, Professor Inatai. I have the pleasure now to introduce my good old friend and colleague, Laura Elena Marinaș, associate professor at the same university as myself, the Bucharest University of Economic Studies. Also, unlike myself, very well involved in the administrative part of the European story in our country as Director General in the Ministry of Investments and European Projects. She has 5-year experience in the national system of management and control of European grants, and I have the sense that 5 years is an understatement. You have much more experience. Of course, 15 years of broad experience in the implementation and management of projects with European funding. Just to simplify the picture, Laura is a EU funds guru in Romania. Laura, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'm very honored to be here and to discuss about single market, competitiveness, twin transition, and funds. I also like to thank to my colleague, also former students, during my first years of academic activity. And I would say I'm not a guru, I'm just interested and I like the area. And I was lucky enough to work on both parts of on both sides of these activities involving EU funds. At present, I'm a General Director for Programming and System Coordination for the Cohesion Policy. Therefore, I would like to refer to some specific issues and some specific approaches and opportunities for supporting growth, competitiveness, and the twin transition in Romania. First of all, there was the guest speakers, and the speakers to this event had referred to the importance of the single market, the importance of the competitiveness, and the importance of the twin transition. I would say that for the next 30 years, the economic growth and competitiveness of the European Union will be triggered by the twin transition. So the green and digital transition will be the very engine of future developments. This means that new opportunities will be available, but also there will be new challenges. In particular, because the twin transitions, the twin transition is asking for structural changes, and also requires new approaches, the use of new technologies. It asks also to make full use of the advantages provided by digitalization, and also new competencies, new knowledge are required. In particular, competencies related to intelligence specialization. These are only some of the areas which are taken into account when the programming of the European funds under cohesion policy for 2021-2027 was done. And I would also say that twin transition, competitiveness, should also take into consideration, and EU funds and any form of funding should take into consideration specific needs for investments and specific features, specific patterns of the regions, because the regions are different, their potential is different, and also innovation is one important issue to be taken into consideration when discussing about all these topics. To come to the very point of the EU funding and the cohesion policy, for Romania, for this programming period, there is a total EU allocation of about 31 billion euro under cohesion policy, and the total allocation, including the public contribution, is over 46 billion euro for this period. Also, this money are programmed, are planned, and are to be used under 16 programs. And it is for the first time, and it is a real challenge, that Romania has for this period 8 regional programs, which are programmed and which are addressing specific needs of the 8 development regions existing in Romania. There are also common elements for these regional programs addressing specific needs of the region, such as new competencies, new technologies, research and development, innovation, addressing the challenges of the green transition, and also implementing the principle of nobody is left behind through specific just transition plans and just transition programs. To be also more specific, under the cohesion policy, the minimum allocation for small and medium-sized enterprises and enterprises, which are also key elements, key actors in this ecosystem of innovation, research, development, and also key actors for increased economic competitiveness, Romania will allocate about 6.5 billion euro for, in particular, for small and medium-sized enterprises developing activities in the ICT sector. Will also address, the programs also include specific financial instruments to support the activities of these small and medium-sized enterprises, and also various instruments supporting or providing loans and guarantees for small and medium-sized enterprises. Under education and employment program, there are envisaged measures for ensuring equal access to quality education and relevant competencies for the future needs of the labor market. There are over 1.3 billion euro to this end. Under just transition program, there are about 2.5 billion euros to support the just transition and to support 6 counties in Romania to address the effects of the green transition, to address the challenges raised by meeting the climate objectives of the European Union, and also to deal with effects the effects which are expected to affect employment and business opportunities in those countries. There are over 1.5 billion euro to support investment in new enterprises, to support spin-offs, to support projects for urban regeneration under the Just Transition program. To these resources under the cohesion policy, we should not forget the resources under recovery and resilience mechanisms provided through the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, which provides funding of over 3 billion euro, in particular for SMEs, for energy, for digitalization and research development, and also for activities developed by SMEs in all of these areas. So new capacities for producing energy, in particular energy from renewable resources, also over 30 million euro for digital transformation and of enterprises, Also over 50 billion euro for cross-border and multinational projects in the field of electronics and also in the field of critical resources and technologies. And I could add a lot of figures and a lot of opportunities. But what it is important at this moment is to make full and effective use of these resources. The implementation of the projects is about to start in the very next future. We are expecting to have the first call for project opened by end of May, meaning second quarter of this year. Also, in order to ensure equal access and transparent access to information about funds, recently, in fact, a month ago, on 15th of February, there was published consolidated, let's say, timetable for launching the call for projects under all 16 programs and also under a national recovery and resilience plan. This is one of the, let's say, initiatives which is unique at the level of the European Union, for the moment at least, as we know, because it provides the possibility to all applicants, to all interested entities, to check which are the opportunities, when the calls are to be launched. So it ensures predictability and better condition for accessing these funds. Also, actions and measures to reduce the administrative burden and also bureaucracy in accessing funds without affecting the quality of implementation and without affecting, let's say, conformity with European rules are envisaged. So also in the next period, we are expecting to have a revised and renewed legal framework to improve, to simplify, and to increase the interoperability of existing systems to support faster and more effective and simplified access and use of these EU funds. So I will end my my intervention here, and I hope that in about, let's say, 6 or 7 years, to have the possibility to meet again and to speak about the very about the excellent, the outstanding results of the projects using these funds to support competitiveness and the twin transition. And thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Laura. You helped me remind some very brief discussion on the topic of European funding I had some years ago. Someone asked me, Professor Joram, tell us in less than 10 words, what's your solution for squeezing out the maximum of benefits from, let's say, some billion euros coming from the European coffers? I took up a moment to have a big breath and number the words, and I said, treat those millions as capital, not just as mere money. It was a very elliptical and a very laconic way of saying one of the most fundamental. If fundamental has a degree of comparison, which it doesn't, but for the sake of emphasis, it is one of the most fundamental assertion that an economist should be aware of when speaking about the proper use of public money. It's now my pleasure to take to the last but not the least speaker in our virtual table, I open a parenthesis. We, as journalists, have the compelling exigence of consulting for each and every piece of information that we have 3 independent, uncorrelated sources. And if I had a situation in which I must ask 3 different economists to give me an illuminating opinion on whatever topic I might have in my head, out of any other distributions of 3 economists that I might looked into the Romanian market of economic analysis, one fixed point would be Valentin Lazar, irrespective of the other 2 persons that might join the trio. Why? For many reasons, but briefly, because he is chief economist at the National Bank of Romania, member of the European Institute of Romania Consultative Scientific Board, for his start in his career as an economist, as well as a researcher, being head of monetary policy and then Secretary of State in the Ministry of Public Finances. So bringing together scholarly rationales with pragmatical approaches. He's an economist by formation, graduated in economics from the Bucharest University of Economic Studies, also my alma mater. And he followed during his professional career postgraduate education abroad at prestigious institutions like the International Monetary Fund Institute in Washington, Sussex University in United Kingdom, or Istituto Giordano dell'Amore in Italy. Mr. Lazar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I hope you didn't set the bar too high for me. I have divided my speech into 3 parts. First part deals with how unprepared was Europe for this crisis when they started. And we have to recognize that we are now living in, we are not anymore living in a globalized economy, but rather in a multipolar world, which is here to stay with us. The signs of this multipolarization have appeared for many years, but for some reason or another, the Europeans didn't want to see them. The EU has for too long outsourced its own defense to America, its energy supply to Russia, and its manufacture supply to China, as if the world were a peaceful, friendly, and benevolent place. This was well intended but naive from the part of Europeans. Worse, there is no raw leader among European states in terms of strategic European thinking. Germany, for instance, was and still is to a large extent trapped in the model of the globalized economy. Maybe some strategic thinking at the European level can be found in France and maybe in Great Britain, but then again, Britain left in 2016. Let me give you just a couple of examples of how this outsourcing of your own capabilities has affected Europe before the crisis. Let me, for instance, quote the share of expenditure of military expenditures in GDP as of 2020, according to Statista. Romania ranked 4th in the EU with 2% of military expenditures, while Germany ranked 18th with only 1% expenditures. Sweden, by the way, ranked 14th with 1.1% of GDP military expenditures. Another example, energy dependence back in 2020, according to Eurostat. In terms of independence, of being independent from imports of energy, Romania ranked 2nd in Europe with only 28% being imported of the energy, Germany ranked 16th with 63% of energy imported. Sweden was third with 33% of energy imported, and so on and so forth. Many other examples can be given. Also, in terms of innovation, the EU lagged and still lags the United States of America and China by very much. For instance, Bertelsmann Foundation found that out of 58 fields of top research, 50 out of and ranking by places: first place, second place, third place. In the first place, 50 out of 58 projects were belonging to North America, i.e. to the United States. 8 projects came on the first place from Asia, most of them from China. 0 out of 58 came from Europe. On the second place, the ranking is as follows: 9 times the USA on the second place, 40 times Asia, 9 times Europe. Mind you, Europe comprising Britain, because if you take Britain out, it would be even less. On the third place, 0 times America, 35 times Asia, 23 times Europe, including Britain. So all this is showing you that we were too complacent and too relying on outside powers. And this has to change irrespective of the cost. And now I want to relate to your question, specific question: what if Europe can produce some good but more expensive than otherwise? So if you are in a strategic competition, so be it. You will produce more expensively, and that's it. You have to produce expensive how they are in order just to stay in competition with the others. Otherwise, we will be forever dependent on the whims of more or less friendly countries. Let me turn now to the second part of my speech. What can be done and what already has started to be done at the European level, starting from the point that the European Commission has identified 137 goods on which Europe depends on third country suppliers. And just to give you a few examples of such goods: pharmaceutical ingredients, batteries, cloud and edge computing, cybersecurity, hydrogen, IT software, photovoltaic panels, raw materials, semiconductors. The response of the European Commission was to reinforce the single market through the creation of so-called industrial alliances, such as in the fields of raw materials, pure hydrogen, industrial data exchange, peripheral and cloud microelectronics, cloud technologies. So one concept is this industrial alliances between countries from Europe or friendly countries. Also, another concept is the strategic industrial projects like battery production or microelectronic production. Now let me turn to the third part. What can Romania contribute to all these developments? In terms of how diversified is its industrial production, Romania, believe it or not, is classified as an economy with forward linkages by the OECD Global Value Added Tax. This is a good classification because we're in the same bracket with Germany, Austria, Sweden, France, Finland, Netherlands, and Poland, meaning a quite diversified industrial base and potentially with high value added. However, Romania, in terms of innovation, is only an emerging innovator, like all other Central European countries, except Czechia, the Czech Republic, which is a moderate innovator, which is a step ahead of the other Central and Eastern Europeans. In conclusion, I think that Europe needs to extend such cooperative frameworks like the industrial alliances, strategical industrial projects, and to find place for all, and I emphasize all Central and Eastern European countries within these systems. And a final word about friend shoring, about bringing products closer to Europe or within Europe. I think some developed countries like Germany want, and for good reason, to get rid of energy-intensive productions such as ammonia or aluminium. Probably, if they were to be produced somewhere else, but still in Europe, they would like them to be produced in countries like Romania, Bulgaria, or whatever. That's fair enough, as long as we in Romania, Bulgaria, and so on, also receive some part of the new industrial technologies, let's say semiconductors, yeah? Let's say, I don't know exactly, but maybe Romania is good in semiconductors, which I hear it is. Okay, we will produce aluminium, which is, and German aluminium and whatever aluminium for the sake of Europe, but let us also produce European semiconductors or whatever. So I think this kind of negotiations with give and take, with compromises, within the framework of home shoring needs to take place. And here I stop, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lazia. The topic of economic and political calculations within the otherwise so united and so harmonic European Union is a topic that always worth discussing, because Europe in many ways expresses itself outwardly on one voice, but the coagulation of this one voice should be made very thoroughly by selecting the most relevant voices from within. And economic rationales provide a very objective criteria of ordering those voices on the basis of their pertinence and weight in the internal dialogue of European national interests. Eventually, we always are all years waiting for the Romanian voice in this context. Thank you so much, dear panelists. Now, in a very democratic gesture, I will try to restore power to the people in a capitalistic way, not in other meanings of the same expression. Power to the people, or power to the voice of the people, and not any kind of people, but educated people and interested people in serious topics related to the future of the European Union and its very fluid existence nowadays. We've already collected 3 questions from the form that was available for the participants, but on the spot, if there are participants who want to share their thoughts or address questions to the experts invited, feel free to use the next almost half an hour that is devoted to this process with hands up. If I'm not saying, please raise your voice to me if I'm not seeing any hands because of the limitation of the screen of my laptop. I will break the ice, because we are in times of global warming and ice is breaking anyways. I will break the ice with first question coming from the public, and this question is: what potential does the EU have to gain ground anywhere in the chip supply chain, chip as in chipset, as a technical device, not as in less expensive, and chip supply chain, considering both the US efforts to boost home production as well as the proposed EU Chips Act. Dear participants, please. If technology is a too tight topic, I will pass to the next question, and the issue with chip supply chain. I also work in the background. Another question that comes from the public is related to the description of the mindset that the Romanian authorities should have in order to achieve the targets established through national program of recovery and resilience, which is a framework for the double transition. So a point on the Romanian authorities' mindset in this regard.
Well, let me try with this one. You already gave your answer yourself. Treat money as capital, which apparently our authorities begin to realize and to implement. Those money don't need to be wasted on social giveaways and on social programs and stuff like this, but to be used on investments. Definitely, this is the answer. This is the mindset. Another thing is that we in Romania are not used to think pan-European. Neither are Germans, by the way, but we do need to start thinking pan-European and to find alliances and to accept compromises that not in all instances we will gain, but in some instances we might compromise with a small gain for a small loss, which is not currently in the Romanian mindset anyway. Romanians don't accept losses, any kind of loss. And that's not going to work in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there is any other guest wanted to add something to this meta topic in Romanian society, as in each and every national society in Europe related to national programs of recovery and resilience and their respective experiences back there. Mr. Ekstrom, please.
Yes, I just wanted to make a general reflection. I don't claim to know enough about Romania, but I've been talking to people in some other member states regarding the recovery and resilience plans and also other parts of these green and digital transitions. And it seems to me that, and this is also for the European Commission, I think, and for the EU as a whole, there is a certain need for a kind of long-term thinking. Now, the recovery and resilience plans was a really big effort, and there's been so much analytical work, and I know member states have brought together experts that have worked in a way that they have not really done before in some of the member states I have visited. And I think it would really be useful to think about how do you institutionalize this for the longer run. Then there will always be fights about the budget. Will there be this kind of sovereignty fund that is now discussed or not, and all that, and we don't know, with a lot of uncertainty about the next multi-annual financial perspective and cohesion policy, also in the view of Ukraine getting closer to Europe, other countries. But I think this is something where also perhaps we as think tanks and institutes can do more on what should it look like if you look at institutionalizing what we have learned from the RRF for the next 5-10 years ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Engström. I've noticed Professor Inotai analogic raise of hand, not digital. So you have also the floor.
Yeah, a small personal remark concerning compromise and sovereignty. And still, European in the European Union member states, some member states at least, they emphasize or overemphasize sovereignty. Sovereignty is the most important thing. We have to finally become aware of the fact that nobody is sovereign, not even in several cases, not even the United States. Therefore, it is, and if you have small countries in the European Union very much dependent, both on the Union and sometimes on external sources, and with 1, 2, or 3% of the European Union GDP, it is how we should not use this word sovereignty. What we can use and should use is maneuvering room. What is our maneuvering room? How can, if the country has a 1% share in the European Union's gross domestic product, and it is a big success if it can increase this 1% to 1.5%. So we should talk about maneuvering room, and the increasing maneuvering room needs, of course, much more compromise, much more solidarity, much more cooperation, and that should be understood finally also by the larger EU member countries, but definitely by the smaller ones, if they want to become an integral and genuine part and an active and a progressive part of the European integration in the next years and decades. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yanadai. The third question is related in a sense with our own experience having gathered here in a digital format and needing digital awareness of what's to become the communication of tomorrow. And the question from the public is the following: which are, in your opinion, the actors that can influence the most the improvement of the citizens' digital skills? And if I may expand on this, we might give a point starting from our own positioning, be it in the academia or in the business sector, or in the sector of the authorities, or in the sector of the NGOs. What can all those kind of actors, how can they contribute to the development of the so necessary from now on digital skills? Mr. Engström.
Yes, if I may volunteer, then again, I think, of course, the schools and university education is very important here. And for example, teachers in schools who are perhaps not themselves digital experts to kind of give that kind of training to teachers will be important. But what I really wanted to highlight was the vocational training. As I mentioned in my introduction, I think it's really crucial for competitiveness that you have a skilled workforce now in almost every part of the economy, that because everything is affected by digitalization. And usually I try to refrain from talking too much about Swedish examples, but there is a really good Swedish example, I think, and that is how the trade unions and the employers have now agreed on a program where you can take time off from work. You won't lose your work. You will get a rather good compensation to evolve your skills, and that would include digital skills. And this is also comes with some money from the government. But I think this is, of course, different in different member states. I'm aware that the social partners in different member states have different roles and strength. But I think personally that the trade unions together with the employers can do a lot here, also by being role models and showing why this is really important, that people develop their digital skills when they have already worked 10 or 20 years in the workforce.
Thank you.
I could, if I could add that digitalization happens naturally historically, because I don't think anybody below 30 years of age is unskilled digitally, as I don't believe anybody who works from his office on a computer is digitally unskilled. And anybody who has a bank account is digitally unskilled, and so on and so forth. So people are learning by necessity, and I don't think you have to necessarily organize trainings or courses. I mean, for this basic level, not for high level digitalization. And by the way, Romania is one of the most digitalized countries in Europe, although we only have 16% of people with tertiary training. So skills come when they are needed, or when they are useful. And in this respect, of course, the banks can do a lot, and already are doing a lot, the commercial banks.
Thank you. I will propose a very quick exercise. It's long ago, the period in which intelligent people communicate to each other through treaties is long gone. Now the tweets are the most operative ways of expressing pointy ideas. So let's have this a tweet as a unit of measure in encapsulating the very essence of your answer to the basic question of this conference. It was not an explicitly addressed question, but is somehow implicit in its titling. In the length of a tweet, your 3 ideas about restoring EU competitiveness from now on. I will start in the order of appearance, as in the American movies. Mr. Engström, then Professor Inotai, then Mrs. Marinash, and then Mr. Lazia. A tweet-long conclusion or answer to the question, how could we restore EU competitiveness from now on?
Thank you for that nice question. So I'll write a tweet like this. Global perspective and better partnerships with swing states in other parts of the world. Stop. All parts of the EU has to benefit through better R&D. Stop. More investments in skills and continuing the green transition. Stop.
Thank you. Professor Inotai, quick points.
Microphone, please.
Okay. Okay. Well, very shortly, 3 points. One, investment and on the EU level, which is to some extent the question of money. To a large extent is the regulatory framework, which has to be created, a favorable regulatory framework. Second, education on all levels. And third, what is, I think, is absolutely important for the future, how to enhance the adjustment capacity of the societies. It is not only education and not only training and not only skills. How can the society become more resilient and adaptive to the new challenges and to answer the new challenges in a positive way, and not as to take challenges as a future-oriented investment, take challenges as an opportunity and not as a risk. It is a mental social and mental development, which has to be developed. So finish here.
Thank you. Laura.
Okay, interesting questions. Sorry. I will try to provide an answer similar to the answer you provided related to the funds and EU funds. So I would say market integration, intelligent solution for energy and cities, education and training, of course, and I would add also intelligent and effective approaches to deal with demographic challenges and aging of the population.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Laza.
Yes. Number one, think strategically on an European level. Number two, friendshore as much as possible. Number three, accept gives and takes, i.e. compromises.
Excellent. Thank you, dear guests, dear speakers, dear listeners. If I may abuse of my superpowers as a moderator / facilitator / agitator, I will challenge our distinguished representatives of the diplomatic community to have a very short final word. Mrs. Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador, if you may.
Thank you so much. Excellent to be part. And again, really thanks for organizing this on a hugely important topic of huge importance to the Swedish presidency and for Sweden. So we will come back on this. I've learned a lot. Thank you. Great points. And we are not so good at tweeting, are we? I still say my points of repetition, strategic openness, net zero industry, clear and predictable rules will give us more sustainable competitiveness. That's probably too long already, but still, I will abuse my privilege also to address the issue of digitalization from an inclusiveness point of view, because I believe we need to. I think our societies are to a large extent already digitalized here in the Western world. But what we need to look out for is the segment who isn't, the ones who don't have that opportunity. There we need to look at social measures, how to make sure we do not lose that segment of the society. And that is also part of all kinds of just transition and social measures in all our societies. I wish Romania I know Romania has a very good internet, even though I think mine was failing a bit today, my mistake. But I think there's still a bit to go here in Romania on the digitalization overall. But great conference. Thanks again so much to the European Institute in Romania.
I would like also to express my gratitude and congratulations. I've also learned a lot about a very complex and important and urgent, I would say, topic. It was great to listen the experts speaking about issues that are not only on today's agenda, but issues that will drive and will somehow transform the future. We cannot we cannot afford the luxury of leaving the Europe as such behind, and we cannot afford to leave anyone in the EU behind. We need actually to act and to continue to act in a very smart and a very rapid way, take into consideration the need for keeping the unity and the solidarity at the EU level, and having or basing our solutions for the science, for the experts. And that's why my tweet would refer first to the need for increasing and for encouraging the education and skills. Second, research and development. Third, energy, because we need energy in all forms of not only intellectual energy, but proper energy in order actually to have the possibility to discuss also online about these important topics. Because at the end of the day, we need actually to understand that competitiveness is almost about everything. This is going to be not a sort of mantra, but without having this idea in mind, we will not provide the needs for increasing for instance, the productivity inside Europe. We are not able to deal with the challenges which are ahead of us, and we are not able actually to create the conditions for the future generations. And that being said, we need to realize that we are living in a very important milestone, and the world of tomorrow obviously is not going to be the same as the world of yesterday. We kept out of the pandemic actually the skills of organizing online conferences, but if you're looking backwards, we realize that, despite the fact that we're very critical during the pandemics, but we are dreaming of the good old times of the pandemics when we used to have only the pandemics and not the war in Ukraine. And I think actually we need to, all of us actually, to be prepared for the future challenges, which obviously is going to be more important and greater than today. In a nutshell, congratulations for this event. European Institute of Romania, please keep this good idea of organizing debates. Please bring European ideas more to the Romanian citizens. Please not be shy in sharing views and approaching even challenging times, because we need actually to realize that at the end of the day, we are Europeans and Europe is ours. So we need actually to defend not only the Europe, but we need also to defend ourselves. Thank you so much. Over.
Thank you so much. One of my main lesson in this format and in any other format that involves positioning ourselves as European citizens is that the European project is epitomizing some words that eventually the vagaries of history made them being spoken from outside of what is now European Union. And the message is that despite all the bad news and all the threats and the risks and the menaces that come from both the inanimate nature or from the human nature, one point that the European project made it clear in history is that we will never surrender. I'll give the floor for a very complicated task to the director of the European Institute of Romania. The complicated task is to close the event and still keep its doors open. Thank you.
Thank you, Octavian. Thank you very much for your contribution and for facilitating the dialogue and all the discussions. It was indeed a very productive meeting, and I think with lots of information, questions, dilemmas, and also well-timed answers. And I think the topic we tackle today leaves room for future concrete subjects to be further addressed. So I would also like to thank all the speakers today for their remarks and to the participants. And I do look forward to our future events on important topics on European agenda. Special thanks to my colleagues, Florentina and Georgiana from the Communication Unit, for all the support and efforts in organizing this debate. And we do look forward to seeing you again in our future conferences. Actually, the next event in this series will be organized in autumn in partnership with the Romanian Embassy in Spain. So we look forward to seeing you there. So all the best to you. Thank you once more.